In this video, I'm going to show you how to make my quick and easy Funfetti cake pops. This recipe is quite large, but you can always make less. I started off by crumbling my cake layers that I have left until it was small crumbs. The amount of buttercream you'll need is always depending on the amount of crumbs that you have. I had about 1 kilo of Funfetti crumbs, so that meant I will need 1 cup of buttercream. Now you can always use ganache as well if you don't have, but I had some buttercream left over and that's what I'm going to use in my recipe. Moving on, I decided to make 3 different kinds of chocolate coverings. So I have dark chocolate, milk chocolate and caramel chocolate. You of course don't have to use all 3, but I just love the idea of 3 different colors and flavors in my cake containers. And the very last thing is of course some Funfetti sprinkles or glitter, just to make everything pop and stand out at the end. I'm starting off by putting all of my crumbs inside my mixer. If you don't have a hand mixer, you can just do this by hand as well. Once we have all of the crumbs inside the mixing bowl, I'm going to continue by adding my buttercream. My buttercream of choice ended up being vanilla, but you can use any other flavor that you feel. Add the buttercream right on top of the cake crumbs. As you can see, mine is quite firm as I left it in the fridge just for a little while to firm up. We don't want a soft buttercream or everything will become mushy. Now add your paddle attachment to your stand mixer, or just start mixing with a wooden spoon or maybe anything else that you have in hand that would end up mixing these two together. You can also use your hands if that is what you feel like doing. You can always use a hand mixer if that is what you have on hand. You want to mix until everything just comes together, and as you can see, the batter is quite firm, easy pressable, so we'll be able to make nice and easy cake pops with that. You can just test it by doing 1 cake ball, rub it inside your hands, and when it came out a ball like that, I was happy with the consistency, and that's exactly what you need. It's now time to start rolling out our cake pops. I like to start with putting just a piece of parchment or non-stick baking paper right onto my work surface where I put the cake pops on. Later you'll see when we work with the chocolate that helps a lot. Now I want to show you, this is the small container I'm going to use, so that's why I call it cake bites. I'm going to roll out quite small little pops and then just make them just enough like a bite size, more or less 1.5 to 1.5 centimeters, and that's exactly what I want to get quite a lot of pops inside that little container. I'm just going to continue rolling them out one by one until I have nothing left. After rolling out all of my cake pops, they now have to go inside the freezer to set up. We're going to work with hot chocolate later, and if we do this right now and just drop them in the chocolate, they will just fall apart, and that's not what we want. So we want a firm little ball that we can easily work with and have no trouble with. This is going into my freezer for at least 30 minutes. After the cake pops had their times to rest, of course you can do this also the previous night and then just coat them in chocolate the next day. I am going to start by melting my chocolate. I'm turning on my gas stove, but I'm only going to do this on a very low heat. If you have an electric stove, that's perfectly fine too. Just make sure your pot is on a very low heat. I'm adding about 1/4 cup of water inside my pot now. I've added a little bit more, so depending on the pot size of course, and I am putting a heat resistant bowl on top. This is called a double boiler, and it's going to slowly simmer and melt my chocolate at a very low heat. You don't want to have your chocolate melt too fast or it will crumble. I'm also not using at any circumstances a steel or stainless steel knife or spoon or anything that will also affect the chocolate. I here have a piece of heat resistant PVC chocolate mixer, if you want to call that, and it helps me by just making sure my chocolate doesn't doesn't curdle at all. So right now, yep, that is not what you want to use. We are going to leave that aside, and now I'm going to start by melting in 100 grams of chocolate. That is about 100 grams there, and now I'm just gonna let that simmer quite on its own, very slowly. This may take a while, but please don't put your stove on faster or it will definitely not melt the way it should. Once my chocolate started melting, I grabbed some coconut oil. I love using this in chocolate, just about a tablespoonful, and drop it inside of the chocolate bowl as well. It will give your chocolate a nice little shine, and it melts perfectly together with the chocolate, so you don't even taste it or see it. My chocolate is just about done. As you can see, I can still see some chips, but because the bowl is still very hot, I'm just going to turn off the heat and take it off the stove. I then continue to stir until all of the chips was gone, and as you can see, I am left with perfectly melted chocolate. It's now finally time to drop in that cute little bites inside the chocolate. Take it out, put it right onto your baking paper or parchment paper, and add a little sprinkles. Of course, you don't have to do one by one. I started doing 3 to 4 pops because they were quite small, so they coated easily inside my melted chocolate, and continue until everything was done as well. I ended up having about 90 or so of my little cake bites, which I then divided in 3 batches and made 30 of the chocolate, 30 of the white milk chocolate, and then 30 of my caramel. So I did exactly the same as I did with the brown milk chocolate. I added the caramel, about 100 grams, melted it exactly the same way on a very slow simmer, and also added some coconut oil to each batch of the others I did. I continued coating and doing exactly the same as I did with the started milk chocolate. For my caramel cake bites, I added some gold glitter just to make them pop on their own, like we did with the Funfetti on the brown one. And of course, lastly, we have our white chocolate, and I did exactly the same as I did with the other two. Melted them on a very low and slow heat until everything was blended together with the coconut oil, and also dropped them inside the chocolate, coated the cake bites, and left them to just dry a bit. And there you have it. After just coating all of my cake bites, I left them to dry for about 15 minutes, and I was left with perfect little bite-sized treats just to share with my friends. I hope you enjoyed your video today, and you get some time to go and make them for your family and friends too. Thank you for joining me.